Hello. Sound like a parrot. Hello. Do you want water?
Yes, please. Hello, everyone. Once upon a time, there was a 17-year-old girl named Susan who grew up in Southern California. Susan, correct me if I get anything wrong. In fairy tales, women are always either princesses or maidens raised in very poor families. Our Susan was no princess. So she dropped out of high school and ended up marrying a very possessive man. One night, though, she escaped to go to a Led Zeppelin concert. And even though our Cinderella here needed to get back home even before the show started because she had a curfew, there at the venue, she had a revelation. One day, she would be part of that world. And she did soon enough. She moved to Hollywood to train and work as an audio technician, a job still pretty uncommon for women in the 21st century. So imagine at the end of the 1970s when she started working as that. And she got a gig with one of her musical idols, Prince. With Prince, she moved from the tech world to the engineering field and worked with him as sound engineer between 1983 and 1987, working on classic albums like Purple Rain, Around the World in a Day, Parade, and Sign of the Times, and on the 1999 and Purple Rain tours. After that, as it was not enough, and after a 20-year multi-platinum earning career, she has worked as a mixer, engineer, and record producer on albums by David Byrne, Bare Naked Ladies, and Tricky, among many others. But our Susan was curious, and though in fairy tales this is something that never ends well, especially for women, when she turned 40, she went to college and ended up getting a PhD in music perception and cognition, becoming a professor at the prestigious Berklee College of Music, where she teaches music production, engineering, and psychoacoustics. From her two passions combined, record making and music perception from a behavioral neuroscience perspective, comes This Is What It Sounds Like, What the Music You Love Says About You, a book that helps us to understand why we love the music we love, and, spoiler alert, it may not be for the reasons we think. My name is Marta Salicrú. I'm the director of Radio Primavera Sound, and I'm thrilled, really thrilled, to speak with Susan Rogers. I have devoured this book I was talking about, and after reading it, I have questioned my so-called musical taste to the extent that I now think that, as Freud once said, maybe it's all because of my parents. Susan Rogers, welcome to Primavera Pro, and thanks for coming.
Thank you. Thanks, Marta. Thank you very much.
Yes, please.
When I knew I was coming here, I was hoping that the book would be sold here in Spanish. We signed a deal with Blackie Books, which is, I understand, very prestigious. They make very beautiful books, but they haven't released it yet in Spanish. It will be. It
will be next year. I just asked them yesterday, and yes, we'll have the book in Spanish through Blackie Books next year.
That's good.
So let's just use this conversation to tease them, and then buy it like next year. So we've been talking a little while before, but maybe we can also keep on getting to know each other, talking about your listener profile, which is something you talk in your book. You explain in the book that everyone possesses a personalized listener profile. What defines this listener profile, and how is your Susan Rogers listener profile, so we can get to know you a little bit?
Okay. When I left the music business in 2000, I entered college and I did 8 straight years earning my PhD in music perception and cognition. When I was in grad school at McGill University in Montreal, I was learning about how the brain processes music. And I learned some things that just blew my mind and made me think, oh, if only I'd known that when I was in the music business. So it turns out that when we listen to music, there are at least 7 dimensions of recorded music that can individually, singularly, give our listening brain a treat. And by treat, I mean a little release of dopamine, where you think, that's great. So you don't need everything on a record to be perfect to get that treat. The listener profile, yours and mine and ours, is different for each and every listener. We all have a unique profile that is seeking different kinds of treats. Just like we have different taste in food, different styles of fashion that we like, we all form our own taste. So when we're listening to music, we could get a mental treat just from the rhythm, just from the groove. And in that case, the lyrics won't matter that much. The lyrics can be sung in a different language. Doesn't matter, because you're getting all the rewards you want from that groove. Or it might be the melodies. As Prince would have said, Beethoven had nary a drum kit. You don't need a funky drummer if you're Beethoven. Maybe it's melody, maybe it's harmony. Or maybe it's the performance gestures. Maybe it's punk music and it's not a funky groove, but that attitude and that vocal is just killing you. Or maybe it's innovative style. Maybe it's sound design. Maybe it's any one of these 7 dimensions that appeals to just you, your taste, your idea of perfect. So that is your listener profile, those 7 sweet spots. And as I said, each one of us is different. For me personally, who knows? Who knows why these things form? But when you're a little kid, sometimes you'll hear something and it strikes you as being the music of you. It's perfect. And for me, the first time I heard James Brown, I just felt like, now that's the shit. The Supremes, Motown was popular then, but which I liked. It was okay. But when I heard James Brown, I thought, yeah, now that's what I'm talking about. That comes from a brain recognizing that something about this music is what you were looking for, what you were seeking. That happened with Led Zeppelin, the guitar playing and the guitar timbres, and it happened with other artists for their lyric writing. So my listener profile is soul music for that rhythm. I love melody and harmony. I think we probably all do, but I've got an appetite for dissonance in harmony. I have an appetite for clever lyric writing, smart lyric writing. We're both fans, I just learned, of Lana Del Rey, and I understand she's got tattooed on her arm 2 words, Nabokov and Whitman. This woman loves language. I respond to that too in her lyrics. Stylistically, there's just so many things that I love, but I think the street I live on is soul music primarily. That's my home base.
And this is, you speak on the book, how this taste for this kind of music, it is something that makes you connect with Prince in the first place. You shared in the book that both of you shared this sweet spot in music. How can we develop strong connections with people who share a similar taste in music? It has to be with this. It has to do with the brain, with these treats, the thing that we say, oh, we really connect just because we like the same music.
Yeah. I could so easily talk for 20 minutes straight on that, and I'm very tempted to. So I'll because I'm a college professor, I'm used to giving big long lectures. So I'll try to get better at giving short answers. So let me see if I can do this. You know how when you're listening to the music you love the best, it feels like you go into your own head. You shut off the outside world. That's exactly what's happening. So there's a neural network called the default network that becomes active when we go into our own heads, when we're thinking about ourselves, our self-image, our self-awareness. So listening to the music that you love the best is intimate and it's private because it sends your brain into that fantasy world that only you know about. So we could play a record in this room right now, and acoustically, to our ears, it's the same record for everyone. But up here, it's a different record for everyone. So when you bond to a record and you have that experience and you feel like this artist represents the music of you, and then another person tells you, oh, I love that artist too, right away you know that they've had a similar experience to you. You and I just clicked on Brian Wilson. You know Daniel Johnson. You know Josh Tillman, Father John Misty. You know Lana Del Rey. You mentioned artists that you love, and I said, oh, yeah, I love them too. And I know you've had a similar mental experience to me, and that increases our connection between us. And we're sharing that our brains went to a similar place, not the exact same place, but similar, listening to those artists.
Let's talk about me for a second. I've been a music lover since I was a child, quite a music nerd since I was a teenager. And I'm afraid that I've been a bit of a music snob for part of my life. I work at Primavera Sound, what can I say? But not anymore. I realized quite a while that our music taste does not make us better than others.
Right.
And this is something that you are pretty adamant on the book. There is no good music nor bad music, just music that, as you were saying, resonates us or not, puts on this special place. So where do you think that this idea of someone being better than another just because of liking a certain kind of music?
I'm glad you brought that up. It is something that pains me, that people sometimes will reject other people for not liking the same music that they like. A fun question to ask at parties is, could you date or be romantically involved with someone who didn't like the same music as you? And a lot of music lovers would say, no, I couldn't. So we need to think about that for just a moment. The reason we like what we like is because it works for us. It functions. Music as an art form is not the same as the visual arts where you have to pay money to go into a museum to see it, or even films or books. Music is, in many cases, 3 minutes long, and there's an awful lot of it. So we can personally curate all this art that we consider to be the best art there is, our favorite music. And it's tempting to think that because it feels like the best to us, that it's the best to other people. And when you hear other people who listen to something that you don't like, it's tempting to say, well, you don't know music then. Well, yeah, they do. Just as some of us like spicy food, and some of us like food that is sweet, and some of us prefer salty or savory, we all have different tastes. Same thing with our fashion. Of course there's high fashion, and of course there's good choices in fashion, and I suppose there's haute cuisine, and you can pay a lot of money for a certain meal, but you can also really enjoy fast food. And if a lot of people enjoy it, how can you say it's bad? So it's the same thing with our music. I might not like it, but if it's working for someone, it's doing its job as music. It's working, which means it's good.
It's funny what you have mentioned about dating someone that shares your music. I mean, with my partner, music is something that really made us bond. And we had a bad patch quite a while ago because I was kind of interested into trap music and he was not, and it was bad for a while. Then he ended up liking it too. So I can, I can really understand.
That's good. I was going to ask, have you ever learned to like a style of music that you originally didn't like, but you learned to like because you love the person who likes it?
Not because of that, but I have learned to love music which I wasn't. I hadn't been exposed to before, like for instance, jazz music, which I know that you are very into Thelonious Monk, for instance.
Yes, Bud Powell.
Yeah, exactly, and also flamenco music, music that I was not my sweet spot, but I get to know it, but not because of someone that I love and makes me go into this music. I have to say that most of the people around me, we really have similar tastes in music. What about you? You and your friends?
Yes, nearly everyone I know, and certainly everyone I'm close with, they're all musicians, and they make music, and so we have a lot of conversations about music, and musicians tend to be seeking the next thing. So a lot of the people that I'm close with like art music, and we turn each other on to art music. I learned to like, thanks to my students, I learned to like heavy metal, and I learned to like electronic music. It doesn't mean that it's my home base. It doesn't mean that those styles of music are a perfect match for my listener profile, but I like it. There's some treats there. So what happens is, my first year at Berkeley, 2 students, Alex and Andrew, just knew that I was new, and they just wanted to be friends with the new teacher, and they were great, and they
maybe also friends with a new teacher who has worked with Prince and David Byrne, and
sure.
I don't know, maybe that also helped.
Well, yeah, that was for sure. But they're such good guys. That was 15 years ago, and I'm very close friends with them today. Anyway, they were really into, and still are, into the heavy metal, and especially hardcore, that hardcore music, which I knew nothing about. And we'd sit down together, and they'd invite me to their apartments, and they'd play records, and we're there, and we're forming like a triangle. So there's the record here, there's me over here, and then they're over here, and they have such love for this music, and they're playing air guitar, and they're pointing out, here's what's great about it. So I love them, they love the music, and in that triangle, the third leg just automatically forms. As I'm listening to this music, I'm feeling love, and I'm feeling dopamine, and I'm feeling great, and I'm so happy that they invited me and taught me about this music. I learned to love this style of music. Same thing with electronic. When I asked a couple of my students, I don't know electronic music at all, can you show me what's good? And they'd make a playlist for me, and I'd recognize, oh, okay, I see why Stephen likes this. I see why Ken likes this. Okay, I get it. And I think of them as I think of this music, and a little bit of a connection forms.
Mm-hmm. You were explaining, and before you also did, how our brain works when we listen to our favorite songs, these dopamine treats.
Right.
But what happens when it's the other way around? What happens to our brain when we listen, when we are exposed to music that we hate?
So good. It's so good from a neuroscience perspective, and of course it's good from a record-making perspective, because it teaches us you will simply never please everyone. You can do great music, and many people say it's great, and other people say this is awful. So it keeps you humble. So that same default network that I mentioned is concerned with your sense of self. And there's a wee tiny little circuit called the precuneus, and it's serving as the little policeman that determines whether or not a song is going to kind of get into your default network. So the work of Robin Wilkins at Wake Forest University showed people participants lying in an fMRI scanner, functional magnetic resonance imaging, that shows the active brain. And she had the participants come to the lab with music that they liked, that they hated, and a favorite song. And she watched what their brain was doing when they were listening to these categories of music. When you listen to music that you really don't like, within a second, your precuneus is saying, nope, not for me, do not want. And the precuneus cuts itself off from the default network. It normally has connections there, but it cuts itself off when you're listening to music you don't like. And that's your brain saying, I reject this so completely, I don't want it in me. I don't want my sense of self to be associated with this music. That's amazing. And of course, it's the same when we're familiar with this when we taste food, a new food that you say, ugh, I hate that. Or someone, you're clothes shopping and someone shows up a shirt and says, how about this? And you're like, yeah, never. We know about us, and there are brain circuits that instantly decide before you've even consciously thought about it.
Can I ask you about something that happened to me, and in your personal opinion, well, not personal, your experience opinion? I was working as a music critic, and I was at a show, at a concert, very kind of big one, very successful band here in Catalonia, wow. And I profoundly dislike it, but I had to be there because it was my job. People was enjoying it very much, but I was hating it. And then I kind of get off ill after that. I get not very much ill, just feverish. But I mean, I arrived home. I had a fever. In the morning after, I was perfectly. Wow. Was it my precuneus working there, or it's just a story that I like to talk about?
Yeah, it might have been. About 6 months ago, I was interviewed by a music journalist for the newly relaunched Cream magazine. Cream was really popular when I was young. It's back. And his question was, what's going on with me when I hear music that I hate, and is it actually physically bad for us? Well, we talked about that because I don't know of the research that would connect an unpleasant aesthetic experience to actual illness. But when we're in the presence of something that we don't like, especially if we kind of have to be there, and you were a journalist who had to be there, you had to write about this band, you're increasing the amount of time that you spend listening to something that's causing you some stress. And it's the stress that can cause illness. It's the release of the stress that's going to start building up and building up and building up. The cortisol there, the fight or flight mechanism is saying, I've got to get out of here. And if you realize, no, I can't, I have to stay here, that can trigger, it can trigger things that cause you to be ill, or more likely it breaks down your defenses, so that if there's a little virus or something floating around in there, it says, aha, I see my opportunity. So it makes eminent sense that unpleasant experiences could ultimately lead you to physically feel bad.
You have named your book, This Is What It Sounds Like, after a line of When Doves Cry. This is what it sounds like when doves cry. So what did you want to activate on the brain of the reader that recognized that mention?
Oh, I don't know. I suppose I just wanted to say thank you to Prince for making my professional life possible. We had a hard time coming up with a title for the book. I kept involving the word listening and the listening brain or the listening ear, and just couldn't figure it out. My sweetheart, my longtime sweetheart, Tommy Jordan, is a brilliant lyricist from the band Gegita, and I was with Tommy and his dad at Princeton University a few years ago, and Tommy went into the men's room. He came back we were at a restaurant, he came back to the table and he said, I've got it. This is what it sounds like. And it was, ta-da, just, okay, perfect. And I never thought about it. It was so perfect that just became the title. Yeah, but it was a little bit of an homage. I mean, I kept that title because it worked and because it was a way of saying thank you to Prince.
Because with his help, he had upgraded you from being a music technician to a sound engineer. And I guess that they gave you confidence in you also. It was not just, okay, now you're the sound engineer. It's like one of these genius has upgraded me to that. So, of course, I'm worth it.
Yes, and that move professionally doesn't happen. Technicians stay technicians, and that's what I thought was going to be the case for me. I wanted to be an engineer, but you didn't see women engineers. You definitely didn't see women record producers or mixers back then. So I thought, but I want to be in this. I want to be in the music business. So technician, I can do that. That'll be good. I like it. That'll make me happy. But Prince moved me into the engineering chair, and that's a little bit like being a caterer or a waiter at a fancy party, and you're serving, and then someone says, no, sit at the table. Different things, and pretty darn wonderful. I'll always be grateful to him for that.
You has explained in the book that this listener profile that we have, in part, it's created by the music we listen to when we grew up. But I was saying it before, this Freudian reference that in the end sometimes comes to the mother, to our child experience. Why is that?
So when you're little, well, throughout your whole life, everything influences you. But when you got that little brain, it's growing so fast. And imagine this. Imagine you're 4 years old and you're going with your family on a holiday, and mom and dad are there, and you're in the back seat, and everybody's happy. And you're so excited. You're going on a holiday. You're so happy. And the radio is playing in the car, and a song comes on. And you're already feeling great. You have endorphins in your body and opiates and dopamine, and all the good stuff is going on in your little body. And then that music comes on, and the sound of that music is happening at the same time as these good feelings in your body. And on some level, you're going to feel like, this is the music of me. This music expresses me. So there will be those moments in our youth. It's not necessarily a direct line, but there will be those moments where you recognize, not that record, it's this record. So our listener profile forms from our culture, the music we're lucky enough to be exposed to, as well as the perfect pairings of feeling great when a certain record comes on.
You have exactly described some of my memories from my childhood, and I remember perfectly being exposed to records from the Beatles, and especially being kind of puzzled by songs like "I Am the Walrus," for instance, and I imagine that had an impact on me on liking pop music, but this pop music that also makes me go to a place where I do feel puzzled. I do not really understand everything that's happening, but I like this feeling.
That is the great mystery. There's so much remaining to be discovered in brain science. Two hot topics in brain science right now are creativity. Where does that come from? The little precuneus that I mentioned earlier is involved in creativity, and also liking and disliking, preferences, our aesthetic choices. Why do some works of art seem like a perfect expression of ourselves and others not so much? I have a question for you, and the audience, I'd like you to think about your own answer to this. So someone asked me this the other day. She said, what's going on in your brain when you hear a record as an adult that you used to like when you were a kid, And you think to yourself, oh, what was I thinking? I don't like that anymore at all. And I didn't know how to answer her, because I don't think I've ever had that experience.
Neither do I.
The stuff I liked when I was young, I still like. I don't listen to it as my go-to music necessarily, but I still don't know how to answer that question. I think for some of us, our listener profile maybe starts to form, and then we tear it down and we rebuild it. And this is what she described. She said, yeah, when I was a teenager in high school, she said, I did not want to align with any style of music. I didn't want to be with the pop kids necessarily, or the hip hop kids, or the rock kids, because I was still making up my mind which group I belonged to. And I thought that's really interesting. So maybe she did rebuild her listener profile. For me, I've never had that.
It's the same for me. For instance, I also recall that I had a music tape, and when I was like, I don't know, 6 years old, and on one side of the tape I had music from TV cartoons, like, and on the other side there was Depeche Mode.
Wow.
And of course, they've been. I do not listen to the cartoon soundtrack at all. Even though I listen to the cartoon soundtrack from what we saw with my kid. We listen to, for instance, the soundtrack of an anime that's called Sakura, and I absolutely adored the soundtrack. But I adored Depeche Mode, which I start to love when I was 6 years old, which is maybe not the best moment for a kid to listen to music about BDSM, for instance, and something like that. But it was something that connected with me. When you was recalling your moment listening to James Brown, was also in a very happy moment.
Well, yeah, the family was visiting. My aunt and uncle and cousin came over to visit, and cousin Mike was 3 years older than me, and he brought some 45s, some records, and we all put on the records in the living room, and Mike was showing us how to dance, and this was probably 1965. And Mike was showing us, here's the cool dance that the cool kids are doing. And Mike was the cool kid because he was 3 years older. And so he was showing us, here's the dance you do. So of course I felt good. I was open-minded. I was receptive to learning something new. This is Cousin Mike, and he's cool. He's going to show us something good. And when that record came on, and he played quite a few different records, but in particular, when Papa's Got a Brand New Bag came on, bum, bum, and instantly the body just said, yep, stop right there. I'm living here. I'm going to live right here on this street. That is the great mystery of our love for music. You'll discover it, future scientists will discover it in the childhood experiences where we experience recognition in hearing the artwork of someone else. That's the music of me. That's just crazy how that happens, but it happens.
You are now describing this gathering of family or a group to listen to music, and also you talk about how nowadays we usually tend to listen to music while multitasking. We have lost a little bit that experience of listening to music and not doing anything else.
Right.
What do you think that this says about us as a society?
I wish I were smart enough to be able to predict how that's going to go. Now, when I was a kid, you listen to music on vinyl or on the radio, but when you went to your friends' houses, you take your records with you because you didn't have every record that was out. You might have just gotten the new Pink Floyd record, and your friend just got the new Led Zeppelin record, and so you go to each other's houses so you can listen to them together. But today, I can be talking with students about Pink Floyd, and they grab their phone and they're like, oh, okay, got it right here. So for one thing, everybody has everything. For another thing, there's more music than there ever has been before. And for a third thing, it's so portable that people just put in earbuds and they go about their lives. When you sat in front of the loudspeakers and listened to vinyl records, you looked at the album cover art and you read the lyrics if they were there, you read the credits and you looked at the images. And you don't do that now. So the music is accompanying visions that aren't connected to the music, and the accompanying activities that don't have anything to do with music listening. If I were making records today, I know I'd have to incorporate a lot more repetition in order to serve the listener who might be working out or commuting or something like that, that you don't want to distract people who do not want to be distracted. They just want melody and rhythm to give them a little bit of emotional company and maybe give them a pulse to coordinate their body and nothing more. Now that might predict that music is getting worse because we're thinking, right, you're just making it to be a backdrop. That's not true. There are great artists, many of whom are at Primavera Pro this week. There are great artists doing great musical work, every bit as worthy as the music that came in earlier generations. And I suppose that only the real deep listeners, the real seekers of music, the curators of music, the ones who have a deep relationship to it, will find these artists. But those are the artists who will have the long careers, that's for sure.
You would also, if you were working now as a music producer, maybe you also would look for with the artists like a short snippet that works well on TikTok, and then that would help the song went viral and then very listened to. What do you think about that? And also the same question: what does this says about us the listener profile of our society?
Yeah, we're changing. We're growing very fast. Some of my students, I visited them in Miami not too long ago, and one of them was telling me that a lot of the work he gets is from record labels to mix a segment of a song that's 1 minute long and 15 seconds long. Mixing something that's 15 seconds long or 1 minute long for TikTok, it brings him work. I just stop at the gate there and think, I don't know how to enter this world. But an important thing to consider is on TikTok, it's not about the music. What people are consuming is not music, if they're per se. If they want a musical experience, they look elsewhere. But I don't even know what TikTok looks like. But I think it's people dancing and things like that.
Sometimes there's also a lot of people talking, a lot of people getting ready to do something, and then like doing their makeup and talking to the camera. It's there are a lot of different things happening.
Marvelous.
But also, as you were saying, then there's an amazing artist like Pink Pantheress, who's also on Primavera Sound this weekend, who started releasing music in these short snippets on TikTok, and then...
Yeah. Music business, being in the arts, it's so difficult. It's so difficult. It's so competitive. And I have such great respect for artists. I owe my career to them. That if there's any way for artists to get attention or to make money, then do it. Then it's a good thing. It's a good thing. And I have great faith in human beings, great optimism in the human brain and the human capacity for art. So sometimes when an older person will say to me, music is terrible now, it used to be great, it's terrible, I don't like to argue, but I'm thinking to myself, no, it's not terrible. It's not. There are great things being done right now.
It is very common as people is growing old, like deciding, or no, I guess that it's not a decision, but sometimes these sweet spots start to getting wider. It's like, okay, this is as far as it gets. I'm not gonna enjoy.
Right.
But of course, it's not for everyone. I mean, you were explaining that it's not how you feel. You keep on discovering new things, new exciting styles, artists, genres. I feel exactly like you. And while some friends of mine, they are still listening to the same music we listened together when we were 20 years old. So why do you think that is that?
That's an interesting thing too. And I will admit that my deepest loves musically are for records that I discovered when I was younger. That's where the strong bonds happen, when we're teenagers and when we're in our 20s. That's where the real strength and connection happens. So I think of the 7 sweet spots on your listener profile like a constellation of 7 stars. And when astronomers, cosmologists look at a constellation, they know that it looks different depending on your perspective. A constellation will look different on Mars compared to how it looks on Earth. So sometimes when a given record arrives, it might land right in the middle of all those 7 sweet spots and not be close enough to any one of them for you to feel any attraction. But other times it will land right next to your planet for lyrics or for melody or for rhythm, and you feel that gravitational pull, and you're like, yep, that's the rhythm I like. That's the sound design that I like. That's the performance style that I like. Now, when a new record comes along, it may have a similar rhythm, but why would you bother letting it get absorbed into your planet when you already have the rhythms you know you love? So sometimes it's like, yeah, it's good, but I've got that already. I'm getting all the rewards from music listening in my collection. So yeah, there's good reasons why we're not especially motivated to seek out new music. One other thing, though, happens to be the lyrical content. Mm-hmm. When you get older and you're listening to songs about, I just met you, this is crazy, here's my number, call me maybe. It's like, yeah, I did that 40 years ago, and yeah, I'm not interested in it now. So that's a part of it as well.
But as we were talking before, I have to say that I simply adore Call Me Maybe.
It's a really good
and
song.
It's because, as we were saying before, it's this perfect combination where these lyrics that are so simple, but they adjust so well to that melody.
Exactly.
And with that,
yes,
also that riff that goes,
yeah,
that it all works so well together,
yeah,
even though the lyrics are a bit stupid.
Yeah, clever music making. There is a separation between the cream and the milk in all of the arts, and the artists who are successful tend to be those who are pretty deep. Whether they have a deep music theoretic knowledge, or they have insanely great performance skills, or they have a clever eye and ear for culture. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're poets. There's a number of different factors that go in there, but success in the music business is no accident. I have certainly talked with disgruntled artists who believe that the only reason my music isn't successful is because the record label hasn't promoted me enough, or blah, 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 blah. And you don't say anything to them to be polite, but in 99.9% of cases, their music isn't that good. And that's the reason why. So yeah, often what rises to the top is what deserves to be up there for a lot of reasons.
Mm-hmm. You were saying before that you wish you knew, when you were working as a producer, that you wish you knew some things you know now after all your research on brain and how music makes the brain reacts. But I think that this is already you knew before, and it's that some music appeals to is made to appeal the audience, some other music is made to appeal the critics, and some music is made to appeal to other musicians.
Yes.
And it is something that you were asking to the artists you work with, and you were asking this: who do they want their music to appeal?
Right.
How these audiences are different between them.
That's so interesting. So the first time I heard about the Triple Crown, as we call it in the music business, I was working with Tommy Jordan and Greg Kirsten of the band Gegita, who signed to David Byrne's label. Greg Kirsten's a very famous producer today. He co-wrote and produced Adele's last few albums, Hello and Easy on Me and all that. He's worked with a lot of artists. Anyway, we were at the table and Greg brought up the question, who's worn the Triple Crown the longest? What the Triple Crown refers to is 3 separate audiences for music. There's other musicians, there's the general public, and there's the folks like you, Marta. There's the critics and scholars. Now, these 3 audiences are all listening to music through a slightly different ear. The musicians want to be impressed. Show me something that me and my friends couldn't have done. So the bands that other musicians really like tend to be those who are pretty great as performers or theorists or whatever. Then the general public, they just like what they like. They want a quick little treat, and they want it to be fun, and they're not committed to artists so much. And then there's the critics and scholars who are listening for trends and listening for ideas whose time has come. As a record producer, I always read the top critics and music journalists because it gave me a sense of how the people who I respected, how they listened to music and which audience might be the most helpful for this particular record. So when you're going into the studio with an artist to make a record, you do have to think about those 3 audiences. Are we going to try to appeal to the public and have a pop hit? Or do we want to appeal to the critics and make an art record? Or do we want other musicians to worship us like we are musical gods? What's this going to be? And once you decide on one audience, you're going to have to let the other audiences go. It's great if they find you, but it's very hard to hit the Triple Crown and appeal to all 3.
Who has worn the Triple Crown on the book? You mentioned that Prince wore it for a pretty long time. Who else?
Well, Greg Kirsten, when we were talking about it, we thought of the Beatles and Michael Jackson and all that, and we could all think of arguments why they weren't necessarily popular with all 3 audiences. But Duke Ellington wore the Triple Crown, perhaps the longest. The public loved Duke Ellington. He was hugely popular. Critics revered him. Other musicians also, they thought he was a god. So it's hard to find any audience who didn't have the highest regard for Duke Ellington, unlike the Beatles and Michael Jackson. I mean, you can find people who liked R&B and funk who didn't like Whitney Houston, as great as she is, and that applies to Michael Jackson as well. And the Beatles, well, I liked the Beatles okay when I was a kid. I've never owned a Beatles album. I like the Rolling Stones better. So, different audiences.
And what about now? I was asking myself who I think maybe could wear the Triple Crown now. Maybe we could say Beyonce.
Yes, that could be. I had a colleague at Berkeley who said 10 years ago, he said Beyonce is the new Michael Jackson. And I thought, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's true because Michael Jackson was such a phenomenon, a global phenomenon musically. But maybe time will tell, and maybe that's true of Beyonce.
Also, and do you think though that, of course, and you being a woman pioneer on the music business, especially in an area that is so male dominated still now, also, do you think that's, for instance, as we were saying, Beyonce, she has the audience, like she has the public, the general public. She has the critics,
Yes,
but
true.
maybe she's not that admired between the music community because she is a woman, and maybe because she's main talents are vocals and also as a composer, but since we are not seeing her playing an instrument, are we still there, like thinking that if people is not grabbing an instrument, they do not deserve respect enough from the music community?
Yeah, I'm not sure that's true, because Billie Holiday, Ella
Yes.
Fitzgerald, just recently watched documentaries on both of them, and they were
Idolized.
no one besmirched or put down their incredible talents. There is a complication there, though, with Beyonce, because she's married to someone who's called a musical genius. And so it's easy to assume that through that partnership that she's the one who does the singing and she's the face of the music and that Jay-Z is the brains behind it. It's easy to assume that. Without knowing, we don't know. But that's a difficulty for women when they are partnered with men who are acknowledged to be brilliant. It can automatically put them in the shadow because the light all falls on that partner.
Mm-hmm.
I was on the airplane coming here yesterday, and there was a middle-aged man. I don't know why this is funny. It was a middle-aged man wearing a Taylor Swift T-shirt. And, he's standing in front of me for a long time. You're waiting for the door to open so you can get out of the plane. And I was just staring at the back of that Taylor Swift T-shirt, which had all the tour dates. I was trying to figure out why. Like, did he go to the Taylor Swift concert? Did someone buy him this T-shirt? Was it a gift? Or did he go to Taylor Swift and thought before he left, I've got to have a T-shirt? And I thought, if that's the case, what is Taylor Swift's music doing for this guy? I'd love to know. It's probably, Taylor Swift for this guy is probably the same as the Mars Volta for me. I mean, I would listen to that music and someone might think, what is a 66-year-old woman doing listening to this music? Oh, but inside me, it's expressing something that is present in me. And clearly Taylor Swift, if he's a fan, is expressing something that's present in him. It was a beautiful thing and a puzzling thing.
I want to ask you to play a little game that we thought that we were going to play. We were talking about these different audiences that an artist, with the help of the producer, can target when making a song. If it's the general public or it is the music critics or the other musicians. So I'm going to say some artists that are playing at Primavera Sound 2023, and I'd like to ask you, who do you think they target as audiences, at least mainly, okay?
And yes, but because you're a music critic and a very successful one, can you do it too? You tell me who you think.
Okay.
Because there's no right or wrong answers. We're spitballing here, but yeah, I'd like to know what you think too.
Okay, so, we're starting with one of the headliners, Depeche Mode.
Now, I would say pop. I would say it's the general public. And the reason I say that, and this is why I want your opinion, is when Depeche Mode was popular, in the 80s, I didn't know any musicians who set them up as an exemplar. And I wouldn't be interested in them, so I wouldn't read the reviews. I don't know what the critics thought of them. I know they were hugely successful with the public, so that would be, I would think, their target audience. But what was your impression of them?
I think that they definitely target audience, and the proof of that is that they are being successful targeting audiences from the 80s.
Yeah.
And now, I mean, it's a band that even though they've been more than 40 years with working, they are still getting new audiences. They have plenty of young people among their audiences. So great. But also, I think that in the beginning, when they start using synthesizers, it was a bit of a fad then, but also I'm not saying that they were revolutionary using them, but they were a bit avant-garde. So I think that they also target the critics a little bit.
Yeah, they were out in front of the 80s synthesizer pop music and did it extremely well because they didn't have the rhythm that I prefer. They were never my band. I was listening for that rhythm in that 80s synth pop and working for Prince. So my ear was looking for its treats in a different area of the dog park. Yeah.
And what about Kendrick Lamar?
Oh, so brilliant. Because I think he's genius, I would have to say it's the critics. I would assume that the critics also, I think they do, write about how brilliant he is. Other musicians, I have to tell you a quick story. I know we're going to run out of time, but this was remarkable to me. When To Pimp a Butterfly came out, it was a brand new album, and I was taking 8 Berklee College of Music students to New York to attend a conference. And I'm driving the van, and I thought, well, this would be great. I just got the new Kendrick Lamar album. I can listen to it in the car. The kids will like it, and we'll get there. So I put in, it was a CD. I put in the CD, and it's To Pimp a Butterfly, and I'm driving, and I'm just in heaven because I'm thinking, oh, this is so good. And I got 7 kids in the back and 1 next to me, and finally, Federico from Italy, by song 3, he turns to me and he says, "Do you like this?" And I said, "Oh, yes, it's great, isn't it?" And I looked at his face and I said, "Do you?" And he said, "No." Okay, well, maybe I'll just, I'll get rejected and we'll listen to something else. And I asked the kids in the back, "Do you guys want to listen to something else?" And they all said, "Yes." Now, Berklee's a very international campus, so we had someone from Germany, we had Chinese students, Korean, people from the U.S., but they all guys. And they said, "Yeah," and okay, all right. And so I took it out and I said, "What do you guys want to listen to?" And they all looking at their phones, and someone said, "I've got the new Casey Musgraves." And the others went, "Yeah."
I really like Casey Musgraves, but especially with Pimp a Butterfly, I mean, like the 3 first songs are like completely bonkers. I mean, it's like it's an amazing start for an album. Wouldn't you say, though, that Kendrick Lamar also makes music just for him at the state he is at?
Yeah, I think when you are an artist first, a craftsperson second, because some people are crafts first, and then art emerges from their high level of craft. But this man is an innovator, and so I think he does make music for himself, and he gets to. Lesser artists make crap when they do that, but he makes brilliant works of art. I'm a huge fan.
And what about our one of our most one of the artists that we are most proud of the limelight, which is of course our Rosalia.
Oh, Rosalia! I remember when she first came out, I had a student say to me, and I think he was from Spain, and he said to me, "You've got to check out this artist. She's going to be huge." And he was right. I think he was also very attracted to her. So he thought, "I want her to be around forever." But yeah, she makes incredible pop records. Notice something, especially on her more recent albums, notice how commanding she is on the mic.
Wow.
Notice that she, just like an actor's job is to be thinking constantly, look at me, look at me, look at me. A musician's job is to be thinking, listen to me, listen to me, listen to me. And notice the breaths in between the phrases. Notice how she's pulling in so much air to get right there in your ear and make sure you pay attention to her. It sounds so simple, but lesser artists don't do that. She knows how to play to the camera, and she definitely knows how to play to the microphone.
I would say that she targets critics more than the audience, because of course she's doing pop music, but pretty avant-garde. I mean, I'm surprised and happy that so many people connects with this pop music, that it's so futuristic.
Yeah, she's an innovative artist. She pulls a good team of record makers around her. And I hope this isn't an insult to anybody to make this comparison, but it reminds me of the strategy that Madonna employed early in her career. She knew she was an artist, she knew she could attract attention on the vocal mic, and next she had to work with musical collaborators who were cutting edge. And that was the smart move to make, because unlike Prince or Michael Jackson, she wasn't doing the same thing they were doing. Unlike Prince, she wasn't playing all the instruments, so she collaborated with others. And I think Rosalia is following a similar track in that sense.
We have run out of time, but I want to ask you about two artists which I know that you like very much from the lineup, and one you have mentioned it before, it's the Mars Volta. They are not playing in Barcelona, they are playing just in Madrid.
In Madrid.
So if you want to see them, I'm afraid that you need to go to Madrid. So what about the Mars Volta?
I remember I mentioned the two students earlier, Andrew and Alex, and telling me about their early experiences the first time they heard the first album, Deloused, in the Comatorium, and the reverence they had for it. So I listened, and I liked it, and then I listened to Francis the Mute, and I just was gobsmacked. Years ago, I went to Museum of Modern Art in New York, and there was a Picasso exhibit. It chokes me up even to think about it. There was the sculpture, a bull's head, made of the bicycle seat. And I remember running my eyes over that sculpture and thinking, I want to pretend that my mind thought of that, and I want to look at every detail of it and imagine what it feels like to think like that. And I'm running my eyes over this sculpture, and all of a sudden I had tears coming down. I don't think like that. My brain doesn't do that. Wow. Somebody lived who thinks like that. And same thing, similar with the Mars Volta. You run your mind over all the details in the music, and sometimes you imagine, now what would it be like if I had put all those parts together? And bam, you get that explosion of, who thought of that? It's like reading Vladimir Nabokov or encountering the work of any brilliant mind. So yes, the Mars Volta are brilliant.
And to end, Southern Archives.
Quickly becoming a new favorite artist. I love the musicality, I love the depth, I love the innovation, I love the exploration. I love the contribution she is making to the world of musical art. That's an artist to watch. Stunning.
So don't miss her.
Yes.
Please. I mean, Susan Rogers is saying it, so we need...
Oh, she is a goddess. She's a goddess, yeah.
Well, Susan, we have no more time. I've been enjoying very much this conversation to you. It has been an honor. And remember, everyone, that This Is What It Sounds Like would be published in Spanish next year with Blackie Books. So you'll need to wait for it, or you can get it in English in whatever place you want. But please read it, because you're going to love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Susan
Marta,
Rogers.
so much. This is wonderful. Thank you. Appreciate it.